In Oregon courtrooms,
there is no attorney to appoint to you today.
The public defender shortage pushing the system and its players to a breaking point.
It's hard having too much work to be able to do, knowing what best practices would look like, but not having the time to do every single thing that would help my clients and help my cases.
Plus, I speak with Joe Kent, the Republican candidate for Washington's 3rd Congressional District, about recent reports calling into question the existence of the company he claims to work for.
Let me just ask you, who do you work for?
I work for Advanced Enterprise Solutions. It formerly had the name of American Enterprise Solutions.
And we're live at City Hall as Mayor Ted Wheeler unveils his new homeless plan to council. Hundreds are prepared to testify well into the night for and against the proposed homeless campuses. Finally, a preview of a new KGW production, Wicked West.
As the story goes, she came back inside holding her new baby in one arm and the axe in the other.
She was the first woman ever in the Oregon Territory charged with murder and would be the first woman tried for murder.
Our team scoured the brittle, age-stained records of the past to bring you some of the darkest legends of the Pacific Northwest. Here's the story. I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. So glad you're here. 32 years ago, when I started here at KGW as a reporter, I did a series of stories with a public defender who did not have enough time to fully commit his attention to each client. That public defender went on to become federal judge Michael McShane, and he really cared about his clients. But I've never forgotten the frustration that he shared about too many clients, too many cases, and too little time. But that was nothing like the situation Oregon public defenders find themselves in today, as the system appears to teeter on the edge of collapse. The last 2 nights, we've heard from defendants who can't get a lawyer and crime victims frustrated that defendants are being released because of the shortage. But tonight, Kyle Aboshi is hearing directly from a public defender. Here's part 3 of his series that we're calling Injustice.
As a public defender, Willie Choteson's day is never really done.
A lot of times if I wake up, I think I'm having one day and then it becomes another day. I had a client released from jail unexpectedly not too long ago, and she called me and she had nowhere to go and no one else to call, and I dropped what I was doing and I went and met her at the jail with 2 granola bars that I had in my backpack, because that's what I had.
Despite the long hours, Choteson admits he can't catch up. There just aren't enough public defenders to go around.
We're all working as hard as we can. We're doing as much as we can, and it's not enough.
Oregon's system to provide criminal defense to those who can't afford it was understaffed and underfunded before COVID-19, but a backlog of pandemic-delayed cases has pushed the system to the brink of collapse.
There is a shortage of public defenders available.
In Multnomah County Arraignment Court, defendants often have their hearing dates postponed up to 2 months in hopes a public defender will be available later.
There is no attorney to appoint to you today.
A January report by the American Bar Association found Oregon has 31% of the public defenders it needs. Every existing attorney would have to work more than 26 hours a day to cover the caseload.
It's hard having too much work to be able to do, knowing what best practices would look like, but not having the time to do every single thing that would help my clients and help my cases.
For you personally, does it weigh on you?
Oh, absolutely. It's the middle of the night wake-ups of what are the things I need to do tomorrow, or what are the things I haven't been prioritizing? Who do I need to call back?
This critical shortage of public defenders is not limited to Oregon. Similar problems are occurring in states across the country due to a lack of funding, a backlog of cases flooding the courts, and public defenders leaving for other jobs.
I started with a number of other attorneys, and I'm the only one still at this office from the people who started on the same day I did, because the work is so hard, because the work is underpaid, because the work is so much stress and vicarious trauma in a lot of ways.
In June, Oregon lawmakers approved $100 million for the troubled public defense system. Willie Choteson argues money is not the only solution. He believes criminal justice reform and alternatives to prosecution could ease some of the pressure on Oregon's judicial system.
There's not a shortage of attorneys. People are going to law school. They're just not choosing this work because it is hard, because it is stressful, because we are in the front lines, and because it is underpaid compared to other legal professions.
This crisis has left more than 1,000 criminal defendants in Oregon without legal representation, despite a constitutional right to have an attorney. In short, they're not getting the help they need and deserve.
Kyle joins me now. And Kyle, it sounds like a lot of people don't have lawyers. How many are actually locked up without lawyers?
Yeah, there is some fluctuation in those numbers. I just checked. 44 unrepresented defendants are sitting behind bars as we speak. And Pat, one other important note here. We mentioned how this crisis is not limited to Oregon, but the situation is more complicated here because public defenders are not government employees in Oregon like prosecutors are. Oregon is unique in that public defenders are contractors. And, there's been a lot of talk about whether that should change, whether the system should be restructured. But for now, it really is a system that we're working with.
So what is the solution? How do you fix a broken system?
Yeah, that's the question that everyone is trying to answer, frankly. In the short term, most agree that we've got to work through this backlog of cases. Longer term, money is the big issue. To recruit, retain public defenders, you've got to pay them, right? Often public defenders are making way less than prosecutors. The state legislature, they're hoping to tackle this issue next session. It certainly is a big one.
Well, we've spent the last 3 nights looking at the public defender shortage, and we should remind folks, if you want to watch the entire series, if you missed any of it, you should check it out on KGW's YouTube channel, and it's streaming on KGW+. But before we let you go, I'm curious about your takeaways as a reporter that's been digging into this topic for several weeks. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's one of those topics you get deep in the weeds pretty quickly, and unfortunately for a lot of people, they really don't have the time or the interest to go deep, but criminal justice is a topic that for many people is black and white, and the reality is it's not. It is complicated. And while there's so much focus on police and prosecutors, this shortage of public defenders is having a real impact on real people, as we've seen through this series. And I hope we've conveyed that. I mean, there are close to, 1,300 defendants statewide without a lawyer. And there are hundreds of crime victims that don't feel like they're getting justice either because cases are being delayed. So, yes, it's complicated, but it's also really important.
Yeah, lots of pain on both sides. All right, thanks, Kyle. Excellent reports. The race for Congress in Southwest Washington's 3rd District continues to heat up. The latest issue, who does Republican candidate Joe Kent work for? I mean, it seems like a straightforward question, right? But maybe not. Kent's a retired Green Beret, and the sometimes shadowy world of Special Forces military have some doubting his explanation of who he's employed by. Kent has said many times the company's name is American Enterprise Solutions and has also been quoted saying the company is registered in Delaware and headquartered in Virginia. But the Daily Beast website dug into that and discovered there is no such company with that name in Virginia. KGW also ran a check of 3 databases and found no record of that company in Virginia. Now his campaign says when Kent began working for the company in 2019, it was indeed called American Enterprise Solutions, but that it has since changed its name to Advanced Enterprise Solutions. The campaign sent us his W-2 statements from the year 2020 and for the year 2021. Each shows the employer name is Advanced Enterprise Solutions. Today, Kent said his earlier use of the wrong company name was an error that has been corrected.
I work for Advanced Enterprise Solutions. It formerly had the name of American Enterprise Solutions, so there was some confusion on the name. I went ahead and updated the financial disclosure yesterday, so it's all been corrected.
How did you get it wrong for, was it a year and a half or multiple times anyway?
It was called AES is how we referred to it, so we don't wear a logo or, actually have a centralized home office we go into.
I asked why he didn't just tell that website that they were trying to verify who he works for. Why didn't he tell them that? His first answer was to pivot to concerns that he hears from voters, which he said do not include the name of his employer. But eventually, he did get to the answer.
We were asked real briefly, I think, in an email by the Daily Beast, but I'm not sitting around checking my email constantly. I'm running a campaign and I'm out listening to constituents and talking with people about the real problems affecting their life, not the latest hit piece coming from Daily Beast.
Kent told the Oregon Public Broadcasting that he's a project manager and the company he works for studies telecommunication infrastructure internationally. Just to cover the bases, I asked him about other employment.
Do you work for the CIA or some secret military organization?
No, I do not. I've been really upfront with my my employment history. I spent 20 years in the military. Those records are completely and totally public. People can FOIA them. I can provide them if people want to see my military records, my official military records. Served there as a Green Beret and in special operations, other levels of special operations. And then I was in the CIA for a year. Been very upfront about that too. You can request employment verification from the CIA. It just takes some time. And they're basically just going to tell you that I work for the CIA.
I believe that. Oregon Public Broadcasting also reports that Kent's former campaign manager, who was fired last December, called Kent's employment a phantom job. Byron Sanford is quoted as saying, "That money is coming from somewhere. It's coming from this company that he doesn't even work for." Kent told me that he fired Sanford for lying and that he should not be used as a source for news stories. Now, a follow-up to a fact check we did last week. It involved this campaign ad from Republican Mike Erickson against Democrat Andrea Salinas. They are battling for Oregon's new 6th congressional district, and it's a tough fight. We looked at each statement in the ad and found the first two were accurate, but needed more context. Then we got to this claim.
Now she wants a $5 toll between Wilsonville and Salem.
Last week, I ruled that claim false. I did that based on the citation the Erickson people put on the ad to show where they got that statement and how they were backing it up. We checked, and the bill the citation points to, it had nothing to do with tolling. Same thing with the newspaper they mentioned. Well, turns out the campaign folks put the wrong citation up. And I will have to admit, I should have dug deeper on that statement to see if I could find anything that showed that Salinas voted for tolls. It turns out she did indeed vote for tolls. It was part of House Bill 3055. It happened in 2021. That bill was an extension of the Traffic Congestion Relief Program passed in a big transportation package back in 2017. And that package allows tolls along I-205 and I-5 in a system called value pricing. Now, I'm going to spare you the details on that, but basically you should know this. Tolls are coming in the next couple of years unless lawmakers stop it from happening. We were going to just ignore the campaign's mistake because it seemed like it would take too long to explain to you how they messed up and how we should have dug deeper. But then we started hearing that Democratic fundraisers are using my statement calling that last claim false to prove that Erickson's campaign is lying and the voters should give money to the Democrats. So look, here's the deal. His campaign is not lying. Salinas did indeed vote for tolls as part of a massive transportation bill. But the ad also claims that she wants tolls that are $5. Now, we asked for their supporting evidence on that claim, and they referred us to what turned out to be an opinion piece, a letter written by an HOA president in Charbonneau who thinks tolls could be between $3 and $5. I gotta say, that's pretty flimsy, gang. I'm gonna mark that one as questionable at best. Yes, Selena voted for tolls. No, there's no evidence she wants them to be $5.
Still to come on The Story. We'll take you live to Portland City Hall, where a council meeting is underway for the first reading of Mayor Wheeler's new plan for the homeless, banning unsanctioned camps and creating campuses to hold those living on the streets. We'll chat live with our Blair Best about what we know and don't know about the plan that looks to tackle arguably the biggest issue in our community, when The Story continues.
We're back with the story. We're taking a live look now inside Portland City Council chambers. Nothing's wrong. It's just a break. But they are having a hearing all day where hundreds of people have shown up to testify in response to the mayor's 5-part plan to address homelessness. That plan includes a ban on unsanctioned camping across the entire city. Testimony is expected to last for hours and hours. Blair Best joins us from outside City Hall. Blair, you talked with both sides for those for and against this plan. What are you hearing from them?
Yeah, Pat, this is arguably the most significant and broad approach to tackling this crisis that we've seen in recent years. Now, I was in council chambers earlier tonight, and I can tell you it is both emotional and tense in there as people share their response to this crisis and this plan. More than 200 people signed up to testify today. Now, public testimony started around 3 o'clock this afternoon, and each person got 2 minutes to speak. And we're hearing from those who think it's a step in the right direction, and others who say banning homeless camping will further harm the homeless. Now let's quickly break down the plan. It includes a ban on homeless camping over an 18-month period and building 3 giant homeless campuses instead that would each hold up to 500 people. It calls for 20,000 affordable housing units by 2033, which the mayor is calling a moonshot. He's also proposing changes to city protocols so the homeless can easily access addiction and mental health services, along with making it easier for those cited for low-level offenses to get jobs. Now, council will vote on this plan November 3rd, but today the community is taking the opportunity to speak out. Now, I also want to mention that all 3 gubernatorial candidates support this plan in some form. Now, we're told that because of the high number of people who signed up to testify today, that this meeting could last until 11 p.m.
Wow, highly unusual and very interesting that they are there in person. A lot of this has been done virtual for the last 2.5 years. Where would these camps be built, Blair?
Yeah, so you and many others have that same question, and the simple answer is we just don't know yet. But what we do know is that each one of these 3 campuses have to be large enough to house at first 125 homeless people and then ultimately 500 homeless people. But where exactly they'll be located, we're not sure. However, we are expecting the mayor to announce the location of one of them here in the near future. Now, whether that's this week or perhaps it's next week after council votes on this plan, we're still waiting to hear.
Seems likely it would be on city-owned land, but it will be very interesting to see where that first one is. And what about this? How much will these cost?
Yeah, so Mayor Wheeler was asked that question on Friday, and he couldn't give us any hard numbers. But what we do know is that the city is waiting on funding from the county and the state to implement any part of this plan. So as for how much these specific campuses will cost, that's still an unknown.
Yeah, and I know that the city sends, I think it's about $40 million a year to the county homeless services office to help with the county project. And the group People for Portland has been advocating that that should no longer happen, that $40 million should be used for this project. Be interesting to see if it shakes out that way. What about this? Once these are up, then will the city force campers to move if they don't want to move?
So it's a big concern for many people involved here. And on Friday, the mayor said that if the homeless refuse to go into one of these campuses, they could face criminal charges. Now, I want to point out that that is technically legal because essentially the city is saying you can't camp anymore on this sidewalk, but you can go to this large campus or Safe for Us Village or indoor shelter or you name it. So if the homeless are given an option of somewhere else to go and they decline that option, then it is technically legal for them to face criminal charges, and the mayor is saying that is ultimately what will happen.
All right, thank you so much, Blair Best, outside Portland City Hall live tonight. Well, folks, what do you think about the plan? Let us know. Send an email to thestory@kgw.com or leave us a voicemail. Call our phone number, 503-226-5090. I look forward to hearing from you. Still ahead tonight on The Story, KGW has a new podcast that you've got to check out. Just in time for Halloween, it focuses on the darker side of lore and legends of the Pacific Northwest. We've got a full preview of episode 1, which is available right now. That's coming up after the break. Just in time for Halloween, KGW is taking a look at the darker side of history in the Pacific Northwest. Tonight, we kick off our new series called Wicked West. It's a new podcast put together by our team, but each episode comes with a segment here on TV as well. In part one, Ashley Korsland brings us the story of Charity Lamb, the first woman ever charged with murder in the Oregon Territory.
In May of 1854, the Lamb family gathered around the dinner table in their small cabin. They had settled in Clackamas in the new Oregon Territory after the incredibly difficult journey on the Oregon Trail. Nathaniel Lamb sat at the head of the table, surrounded by his children. His wife, Charity, stepped outside the cabin and retrieved an axe from a woodpile. As the story goes, she came back inside, holding her new baby in one arm and the axe in the other. Charity swung it into the back of Nathaniel's head twice. He lived for almost a week before dying from his injuries. Charity was taken into custody and would be charged with first-degree murder.
She was the first woman ever in the Oregon Territory charged with murder and would be the first woman tried for murder.
First-degree murder carried a penalty of death. Newspapers had a field day with the spectacle. Words like monster and cold-blooded splashed across the front pages.
Obviously, this was fodder for today would have been the tabloids. And back then, a lot of newspapers were very tabloidy. And so this was a story you can imagine that went through the Oregon Territory, a buzz.
Charity's murder trial would last for 6 days. The judge, the prosecutor, and jurors were all men. Women had virtually no rights during this time. They wouldn't be allowed to vote in Oregon for another 60 years.
You were often, property, a little more than property.
For the prosecutor, the case was open and shut. Charity had murdered her husband. Her children even testified to it. The prosecutor argued intent, presenting a singular motive to the court. Charity had been having an affair with another man, he said, and wanted Nathaniel out of the picture.
As the story evolves over time, why did she do this? Well, some thought perhaps because a man had been in town recently, living nearby from California, and there was talk that he had developed a romantic interest in both Charity and Marianne, her 19-year-old daughter, and that both were interested in him romantically as well.
Charity's attorneys argued that Nathaniel was horribly abusive and Charity feared for her life.
Nathaniel was very abusive, threw a hammer at her, abusive language to her, threatened her frequently, threatened to shoot her, treated her like a servant as opposed to a wife.
But there were no larger societal conversations of domestic violence at the time, and few legal protections for women. So Charity's attorneys tried another strategy. They argued she was deranged and didn't comprehend the severity of her actions, therefore could not be held responsible. The law acknowledged insanity as a complete defense to crimes of intent.
They argued that, again, that she didn't have enough mental capabilities to plan this. It was in a heat of passion, as opposed to premeditated.
In the end, the jury returned a guilty verdict, but the judge spared Charity from the punishment of death and instead sentenced her to life in prison.
Charity, as a woman, was assigned the laundry duty. She did the laundry for the other inmates. She did the laundry for the warden's family. Was her duty, and she was in prison there for 8 years.
She was eventually placed in a mental asylum, never taking full responsibility for murdering her husband.
Never really apologized, and you could tell as time went on that she may have been losing touch with reality, but sometimes denied it, sometimes admitted it, but never really apologized for it.
Charity Lamb, nicknamed Oregon's first convicted murderess, lived in the asylum for 15 years until her death in 1879. She was roughly 65 years old.
Wow. Make sure to check out Wicked West wherever you get your podcasts. Also, keep sending your questions and comments to thestory@kgw.com. We're going to wrap things up right after this. Well, that's the end of our show. Thanks so much for being here and for watching. And remember, the story, our story, well, that never ends. I'll see you tomorrow.
This is KGW News at